Okay, so part three, we get to the ending of the story. Um, he moves faster and faster, closer and closer to his goal, to his ending here, right? He moves toward the station. Um, at the sight of the streets thronged with buyers and glaring with gas, recall me to the purpose of my journey. Um, he's a very young narrator, but pretty sophisticated. Um, The train moves along, creeps slowly. Of course, it's frustratingly slowly, right? All again difficulties that stand in the way of him getting to um, this place, to this magical bazaar, right? Um, and so, after all this buildup, Joyce has spent 3 pages building up this Araby, right? It would be a splendid affair. It's going to be a wonderful thing, thinks the girl. Um, and so, yes, this becomes the summons to all my blood. This becomes my mission, my quest, my purpose, right? Um, when he gets there, is it all that it's cracked up to be? No. Um, First of all, he's there too late, right? It's a big hall, and nearly all the stalls were closed, and the greater part of the hall was in darkness. Okay. Again, there's that theme, that motif of light and darkness. Now, if we think about in Western culture, light is good, light is life-giving. You step into the light, you move toward the light, right? Darkness is what? Darkness is death. Darkness is unhappiness. Darkness is, and so, from the very beginning of the story, we've got we're in the darkest days of winter, the short days of winter. So there's a lot of darkness around him everywhere he looks, right? And the neighborhood is described in these very dark terms, right? So the light of his love has kept him going. But when he goes to this place, which there are colored lamps and things, but the hall is in darkness. Right? I recognize the silence like that which pervades a church after a service. Right, things are over. In other words, and for him, this love, this religious love, is about to be over. Right. Um, what's interesting is that, okay, the juxtaposition of church after a service, counting money on a salver. Okay, that should remind you, if you're familiar with Christian stories and the Bible stories, you think about money changers in the temple, right? Jesus cast the money changers out of the temple because they had no place there, right? So the idea of having money in the church is a bad thing. Um, it's gross. It's crass. It's right. It's unholy. Okay. And I listen to the fall of the coins. Right after that, he remembers with difficulty why I had come. Right. He's starting to lose his nerve. He's starting to lose focus. I went over to one of the stalls and examined porcelain vases, flower tea sets. At the stall, a young lady. Now, what's going on with this young lady? Um, they're they have English accents, so they're not locals, right? They're from somewhere else, and there's a very troubled history between Ireland and England. Um, the English have power over the Irish, and have a long history of war and colonization of Ireland, and so the fact that they have English accents might be significant in that way. And what are they doing? They're just flirting, right? Oh, I never said such a thing. Oh, but you did. Oh, but I didn't, right? So they're going back and forth and being silly and flirting, and there's something sort of lascivious about what they're doing here, right? There's two young gentlemen, right, talking to this young lady, um, and then she comes over and says, "Did I wish to buy anything?" Her tone of voice was not encouraging. Of course not, right? She's busy flirting with these guys, trying to get with them, and she doesn't want to deal with this little kid. Um, so, of course, he loses the nerve, right? So this moment that was supposed to be this big crowning achievement for him, and this big consummation of his love for Mangan's sister, ends at this place that's very crass and very um, down and dirty. Just like the rest of his neighborhood, the rest of his world. Okay. This is what we call a loss of innocence story, where a character, or also sometimes called a coming of age story, where a character, a young character, realizes something about life. And the classic loss of innocence story is when the kid discovers that there's no Santa Claus, right? Um, and all of a sudden his world is rocked by that sort of realization. Well, our character, our boy, is rocked by the realization that his love is not really what he thought it was, right? And it's not going to save him, and it's not going to change the world, right? Um, and that brings us to the last part of the last part of the story here. I heard a voice from one end of the gallery that the light was out, right? So again, if light is life, if light is love, that light is now out. Right? The upper part of the hall was now completely dark. Okay, so from blindness in the beginning um, of the story to darkness here, right? We have that idea of vision, and of course the boy has been blind all along to the reality of his life and the reality of his love. He's blinded by love in a way, right? To what's really going on here. And that leads us to this very, very famous last line. Gazing up into the darkness, I saw myself as a creature driven and derided by vanity, and my eyes burned with anguish and anger. Again, the eyes here being the thing. Very interesting, right? Driven, of course, if you're driven by something, you're moved forward by it, right? If you say somebody's driven to succeed, right? Derided, now derided means to be put down, okay? So he's both driven forward by and derided, put down by vanity. Now vanity has two meanings, and I think Joyce is using both of them here. Vanity, for one thing, means to be egotistical or full of yourself or believing yourself more than you are, right? Well, that's true about this boy and his love, right? Vanity also means if you say so, you've done something in vain, it means uselessly, right? So driven by uselessness, derided by uselessness. So his realization at the end of this story is how useless his quest has been. Okay, there's a connection to Nora here, I guess. You know, if you think about the ending of A Doll's House, Nora realizes how phony her life has been, how how insubstantial it's been, and this is the ending of Araby as well. He realizes how phony and how insubstantial his love and his quest has been. And this is the moment of what Joyce would call an epiphany, epiphany. There you go. The moment of realization for a character and an insight into what the world really is all about. And that's a device that Joyce used quite a bit, right? Instead of a climax, instead of an ending in which there's a big triumph or a big loss, you know, a comedy or a tragedy. Instead, we get these very small stories from James Joyce that take place only over a couple of days, maybe, not over a whole lifetime. And we just get a little piece of this character's life, but it's a key moment. If you think about the age of this character, okay, if we think about the difference between the character here and the narrator, okay, the character is the boy, and he's maybe 10 or 12 years old. Who's narrating the story? Who's telling the story? Well, it's him because it says I, so we know it's a first-person story. But in this case, he's much older. I mean, this is not the way, you know, a 12-year-old boy would not say this, right? So clearly the writer is an older man looking back at this moment from his youth. And that lends it a kind of weight. You know, this is what we call a retrospective narrator. So someone is looking back on his youth and thinking about his something that happened when he was young. Obviously, it means something. It changed him in some way. And so that lends a kind of significance to the story as well. All right, so thanks for listening, guys. I am going to post some questions on the discussion board for you guys to chat about and work through. But do think about this story and talk about it a bit more. Thanks.